Hi, this is our chapter 5 on lipids, a quick introduction. Basically, lipids are a category that include fats. Fats might be thought of as solids at room temperature, whereas lipids include both solid and liquid, so it's incorporating oils as well. So this chapter, I feel like it's set in two sections this time. It's maybe a little more complicated than some of the other macronutrients. So I was just going to look at this introduction. So here's just three types of fat. I kind of have the words on here, but anyway, triglycerides, phospholipids, sterols. So we'll be talking about just these three categories in this chapter. Triglycerides is the most common. It's what we eat in our food. It's how fat travels in our blood, mostly. Sterols is what you think of when you think of cholesterol. It's largely made up of sterols, which is a ring structure. It's a different structure than triglycerides. Phospholipids are different again because they are soluble in water, unlike the other two types of lipids. So you'll learn about those. The next thing I just mentioned is that there's essential fatty acids. So there's some fatty acids that you have to get from your diet. Your body can form many different fatty acids, but there's two, one of which is omega-3, you've heard of probably, fatty acid, which is essential. And it's just named. Here's a picture of fatty acids, a long chain of carbons, and it's named that because the third carbon from the end is a double bond, the omega end, and so they call it omega-3. If the sixth carbon or the double bond, the first double bond, so for instance, this has two double bonds, but the first one is here. If the first one were here, it'd be omega-6. If the first one were here, it'd be omega-9. And you'll probably hear those different classifications as well. As far as where you can get these omega fatty acids, just as kind of a quick review, this slide just shows that the food sources of omega-3, you've probably heard, flaxseed, salmon, cod liver oil, olive oil, all of these are higher in omega-3, whereas omega-6 are the things we think of when we're making a salad dressing. Sunflower, corn oil, soybean oil. And again, we're going to learn that every fat, every food or oil has a combination of all different types of fats. It's not 100% one type of fat. So you'll be learning that it's the fat that's the most prominent that we call, like for instance, olive oil is considered a monounsaturated fat just because most of the fat in that oil is a monounsaturated. So here you can see with the composition of fats and oils that a monounsaturated fat would be olive oil, because if you look at the color coding, it has the most of the monounsaturated fat. It does have saturated and it does have unsaturated, but not as much. So that's how they categorize the different fats. Then the second part we'll talk about digestion of fats, and that's largely seen right here from your book, this review of fat. And it looks complicated here, but you'll probably want to review this picture several times. If you look closely, basically when you eat fat or a oil, the droplet then goes into your mouth at first, where there is some lipase to help break down the fatty acids. Then it moves to the stomach, to the small intestine, and that's the next place where you have pancreatic lipase, if you remember from your homework. And the pancreatic lipase then works in the small intestine to continue to take this fat globule, which is quite large, and break it down into smaller pieces. But it can't really break it down. The lipase is right here. These little lines are working on these fat globules. It can't get to very much of a large droplet. The lipase wouldn't get very far with this large droplet. And that's where bile comes in, which we talked about in chapter 3. The bile acids actually break down the larger fat droplet into smaller droplets by emulsification, so that now the lipase can easily start breaking down the smaller droplets of fat into fatty acids and glycerol. And that makes those particles easy to be absorbed. Or think of this as a cell in the small intestine. They easily can absorb and go inside the enterocyte, or the cell of the small intestine. Here it gets complicated. Again, it doesn't just go through the cell and out again into the bloodstream. It actually reformulates inside the cell. It comes in as monoglycerides. It reformulates into triglycerides, And then the triglycerides actually add to them protein, phospholipids, cholesterol, other fats to form what we call a chylomicron. And this is the form in which fat travels in the blood and in the lymph system. And as a matter of fact, it doesn't even go to the blood right away. It goes first to the lymph system, and later it will go to the blood. So there's a little bit more complication in how it's digested, but you've already learned about the enzymes, so you know about bile, you know about lipase, and now we just have to know the action of where the fats go. Another quick review would just be looking at this picture. This is the lipoprotein, so that little chylomicron I talked about is a lipoprotein, which means it has fat and protein in this globule, and that makes it, because the phospholipids are on the outside, it makes it soluble in water. It can travel in your blood. So this is when you talk about, oh, what kind of cholesterol level do you have? How's your HDL? What's your LDL? That's looking at how many of these lipoproteins and what combination you have in your body, like how is your breakdown. So for instance, a chylomicron, which is we talked about, is formed right after you digest your triglycerides, right from the beginning of your digestion, can travel around into your blood. And if you have high levels of LDL, or LDL here, or HDL, this kind of tells the makeup of your fat in your blood, whether it's a lot of protein in these chylomicrons. This is very low in protein, very high in fat, or high in fat. So this tells your lipid profile and how healthy you are. And the last thing I'll just bring up in the end is that you will learn about the actual food sources of these fats and also the effect on your heart. And this slide lets you see a little video of different ways that your heart can be affected by fatty deposits. So this is a little overview. I think it's 7 minutes we took. And so you can take a look at this and email me if you have questions. And I hope you enjoy Chapter 5.